But yeah. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's Scrutiny Children's Services Review Group. My name's Councillor Lee Bridgen. I'll just quickly run through the pre-meeting, usual pre-meeting housekeeping stuff. So the meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the council website within 24 hours of the meeting. Remote participants joining the meeting using Teams, please turn cameras on when speaking and use the hands up icon to indicate a question or comment. Turn your microphones and cameras off when finished. Those in the chamber, please remember to switch microphones on when speaking and speak directly into microphones and turn off when finished. Attendees in the chamber, please switch mobile phones off or place on silent mode. If you need to take a call, please leave the room and return when finished. And that being said, I'll just make sure that I've got mine on silent. Yep. Okay, so first item of the agenda is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Yaroon Begum and also Councillor Petts, who's been subbed by Councillor Wynne.
Thank you, and I've also received apologies from Councillor Keynes. Okay.
I'm not sure. Did we? No,
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's right. Yeah, I'm aware that Councillor Hussain was planning that he was going to be subbing, but yeah, maybe he's running late or something. Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to the next item of the agenda, item 2, which is the minutes of the last meeting on the 2nd of August 2023. The minutes are given from page 5 onwards in the agenda pack. Do you consider those worthy of confirmation or any comments? It's just the two of us who are actually here. I don't have any comments on them, so I think, yeah, so those are approved. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, agenda item 3, which is disclosures of interest. So I'll kick off on that one by declaring that I'm a local authority governor of Summaries Junior School. Councillor Khan? Yeah.
I am a local governing on the local governing body of Dallow Primary School, which is a local primary school.
Councillor Abbas?
Yeah, I'm a governor at William Austin Junior School.
Thank you. And I think that's it on disclosures of interest. Item 4, urgent business. Certainly, I'm not aware of anything. Okay, nothing urgent. No references from committees or other bodies.
None, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, which is the chair's update. Only, I think, an update that I'll give in relation to the parent governor representatives on the Children's Services Review Group. We had one open position and then one co-opted member whose term ended, I think it was a couple of months ago now. Nominations are ongoing at the moment for replacements, and they're due by the 25th of September. If the number of nominations match the number of vacancies, then those nominees will automatically be co-opted. If there are a greater number of nominees and vacancies, then there will be a postal ballot in October, meaning that the successful candidates will likely be in place for the November meeting. So just an update for members on that. That's all I have under this item. So moving on to item 7, which is the Children's Improvement Plan, which is on pages 13 to 18 of the agenda pack. And that is going to be covered by, thank you. Cheers.
Good evening, Chair. My name's Sancha Thomas. I am Interim Service Director for Practice Improvement, Quality Assurance and Innovation. I'm here on behalf of Teresa Gallagher, and she sends her apologies, and she is Interim Director of Operations. As you've got the report in front of you, I will take it as read. And I'd just like to share the highlights with regards to the local authorities children's services progress since our ILAC inspection in 2022, and most recently the focused inspection in July of this year. As you note in the report, we've made significant progress in our quest to get to good and outstanding. Despite our changes in leadership, we have the services remained effective. Our front door provides suitable advice and help and support to families in a timely manner. Our permanent workforce continues to stabilise, and our quality assurance processes have increased and is effective. We do have areas which we are focusing on in terms of strengthening our practices, such as the step up and step down processes, our agency working with our partners, and the quality and timeliness of assessments. We have had some recent diagnostics by our partners in practice, Essex, and they continue to support us on our journey moving forward. We are asking this group if we can present our highlight report on a bi-monthly basis, because as you can see, we are making progress.
Thanks very much. Just a couple of questions for me before perhaps we move to questions on from other members. Looking at the appendix of the report, so on page 15 of the pack, says recruitment strategy to be completed. I was just wondering, I do like to see things a bit time bound. So do you have an aim date as to essentially when the aim is to have that completed?
Yes, our recruitment strategy is being updated. We are working with the Transformation Service in respect of that recruitment strategy. So in timescales, that process is now with the transformation team. I'm unable to give you the timescale with regards to when it will be completed. However, assurance is that we are working in improving our conversion from temp to perm for practitioners coming over to Luton. We had an event on Monday, the 18th of September, and that's looking really positive in terms of those conversations with agency workers. And also we're going to the Community Care Live event in October, where we hope to speak to more social workers in respect of becoming permanent members of staff in Luton. We want to make sure that we're on all platforms, and nationally and locally, in our quest to have a stable workforce.
Thanks very much. I'll open the questions up to the floor. Any questions from members? Councillor, yeah.
Thank you. Can I just turn to page 17? I was looking at the risks there, and you've got risk one about COVID. Is that still relevant?
COVID will always still be around. I think as we know that there are other strains now in COVID, we need to just be aware of it and aware of the impact. But I would say probably we need to relook at that and look at the rating of it and possibly reduce in line with government legislation and guidelines.
I think the impact of COVID in terms of long-term planning as well just needs to be considered. So we know our children and young people and families have been affected as a result of COVID. They're still going to feel the effects of COVID. And I think we just need to bear in mind how we articulate that in our improvement planning.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bamutas?
Sorry, first time I got stuck in the traffic. Can I ask you, in terms of the Ofsted noted improvements, in terms of the multi-agency working arrangements which ensure all partners have a shared understanding of threshold, I mean, is it now? I mean, that was an issue that was years and years. Have we still got that?
In the most recent focused visit, Ofsted was made that a finding with regards to the need to strengthen our partners' understanding with regards to their responsibility in respect of safeguarding and their understanding of threshold. I'd like to give assurances to this group that we are working with our partners in ensuring that they understand the effective support document and asking them to work very closely with us to make sure that there is good multi-agency working. You'll hear later on today with regards to the government consultations and the responsibilities that will be further placed on partners. So we're really getting in front of that. We do have good relationships with our partners, but we know that there's more work to do, and they know there is more work to do with regards to their understanding for each member of their workforce in terms of threshold. We are meeting with them next week at our Children's Improvement Board to have a roundtable conversation about what areas where they see as good practice and what areas they need to strengthen further. And what is also positive is that from the findings and the publication of the focused visit letter, that our partners have really taken hold of that and started to make significant changes within their own organisations. But we all acknowledge there's more work to do.
Can I emphasise to yourselves is that, you know, the Accountability and Improvement Board, you know, the attendance that was very poor in some of the partners. To have an accountability to the improvement board needs to improve if they're not attending or if they're not there and they're not signed up to it, particularly our colleagues from the NHS, who are very slow to adopt and sometimes always passing the buck to somebody else. They have just as much legal responsibility in safeguarding as at the local authority. So they need to be reminded of that.
Can I give reassurances that our partners are at the board and they are all signed up for making the, you know, significant changes? As I said just previously, they are looking at their responsibilities and the feedback from that letter and looking at their improvement plans. They're really keen to work with us. We're having lots of conversations. We have bi-monthly meetings with our health colleagues to look at how we strengthen practice. We've got health colleagues, police colleagues, education colleagues working proactively with us. We've got colleagues in the MASH. We have bi-monthly meetings with colleagues, partners, coffee mornings. So we're doing a lot of work with our colleagues to work multi-agency.
Yeah. The reason I'm saying that, this is for the journey that has taken nearly 7 years, and I'm still saying the Ofsted had the same concern what they had 6 years ago. That's why I'm historically very concerned that this is still an issue and it should be. Can I ask you another one? Quality of assessment and the timelines. I mean, is that improved, or are we where assessment is still? The quality of assessment is still an issue with the Ofsted?
The gap in terms of quality assessments, forgive me, has closed. We obviously, with the turnover of staff, you know, we have had some issue of quality. We're doing a lot of work with regards to that. Our data is saying that we are meeting our timescales a lot better than we were historically. And I know obviously we've come on a journey. It's the word consistency. And that's what we're striving towards in terms of ensuring that each one of our assessments are of good standard for our children and families and progressing plans. But our audit data would say that we're moving in the right direction to achieve that.
Not suggesting for one, they're not moving into the right direction. So it's not a criticism, don't take it sounds. What I'm saying is that it is an issue, and it was a lack of experience on the part of the social worker, you know, who were newly qualified or something. And the supervision was another issue, that we didn't have an experienced supervisor who were able to do that. So I think more can be done, that this issue is one that will, you know, Ofsted will not go away that quickly if your quality of your assessment hasn't improved. Because that also impacts on not only for the child safeguarding, but when you do go to the family court, you know, then that really has an impact on what the court decides in terms of the care orders. So I think we need to be very much, the interest of the child needs to be paramount. The child must be always at the heart of the service. Yes?
Absolutely. And also, we're in the midst of our practice week. You may be aware of that, where we do focus on, in our practice in all areas. And then that would also support and strengthen our practitioners' understanding what makes a good assessment, what makes a good referral, and so forth. So we're really driving forward in terms of that quality and consistency of our assessment. But I think Derridge wants to join.
Thanks, Sanchez. So I think, Councillor, absolutely. What I would say is our monitoring of our performance, both in terms of the quantitative analysis as well as our quality assurance, that's a monthly cycle. So we undertake monthly reviews of all our key performance indicators and check on the direction of travel, particularly around things like the timeliness of assessments. And we held one this week, which has shown an improving journey. There's still more to do, so we can't rest on our laurels around that. And Sanchez substantive post oversaw the audit framework, which looked at the quality. And again, that report is scrutinized on a regular basis through not only the departmental management team, but also the Children's Improvement Board, which is next week. So we're working in the right and moving in the right direction, but there is still work to be done.
I say that in terms of, on number 8, more is positive improvement, and I've studied in prep, despite having the difficulty and the challenge in terms of the leadership and the, service still remains very effective. So that is a congratulation to the staff who are working so hard to improve the service, because it's starting where you started the journey to where you are today. They need to be thanked for that, for working so hard. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll definitely take that message back to our staff. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Wynne,
Yes, just for an explanation for me, because I'm new to this committee and I'll be subbing, as you know, for tonight. The piece on the bottom of page 16, theme 4, and where it says activity for the next period, it's talking about separated migrant children. Now, that actually appeared on national TV in the last week, and central government politicians were unable to give the Newsnight team, as it was, an explanation of how come that we have separated migrant children. How many separated migrant children do we have in Luton? How do we look after them? And how do we actually keep this under control? Because on Newsnight, central government weren't able to give an answer.
So thank you for the question, Councillor. So I think having just had the performance review, we have 57 separated migrant children looked after currently by Luton Borough Council. That number has reduced slightly. It was at its peak around 77. Some of those children have, a number of those children have turned 18. So we still hold a statutory responsibility to their ongoing education, training and employment needs, as well as their accommodation needs, but they're not looked after children because they've turned adults, but they are still under the statutory guidance care leavers to us. How we look after them. So there's a range of interventions. So as soon as we become aware of a separated migrant child in the borough, we identify placement, usually a foster placement for them, depending on the age and ability to live independently. We may look at semi-independent provision, but more often than not, it's a foster placement. And as you would expect any other child, we would try and provide them with all the services they would need, which includes health services, education services, and of course, meeting their care needs as well. In terms of how we control the situation, Luton Borough Council, as part of the National Transfer Scheme, our quota of separated migrant children that should be within our care is 58. Anything above the 58 mark, the National Transfer Scheme should support with dispersal of those children to other local authorities who are underneath their or under their quota. And that's the government's response to trying to manage the situation. In Luton, of course, we've reached that quota, we've exceeded that quota, and we've worked with the National Transfer Scheme to ensure that other local authorities take on their responsibilities. It doesn't always work, if I'm honest, which is why Luton ended up being far above its quota for separated migrant children for a considerable period of time.
Thank you. I have to say that I'm staggered by the number you've given me. You've given me reason to think that it's a much bigger problem than I was led to believe from the national broadcasters this week. If there's 57 in Luton, how many? Do you have any idea how many separated migrant children we have in the UK? Because that looks like an enormous number, much bigger than I would have ever expected.
The Home Office National Transfer Scheme recommendation is that every local authority can have up to 0.1% of their child population as a separated migrant child. So I don't know the child population of the country. However, 0.1% of the entire country's population could effectively be the population of separated migrant children.
Quite staggering.
Okay, just out of curiosity, and then I'll let it go. How do they come to be separated migrant children? Presumably, they've come here with somebody. How have they ended up being separated migrant children? Do you have any idea?
Sorry.
I'm just wondering whether, I mean, it's an interesting sort of point and discussion, but I do wonder whether this is something that's the duty of the Scrutiny Committee.
Perfectly happy to be shut up, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ian. Councillor, one more to say.
Yeah, can I just say just for information for you, there are a number of local authorities of it, different persuasions, yes, Liberal as well as Labour not many, Conservative predominantly, who have refused to take any. And that is something that have been highlighted for years and years. And Luton is one of those that, because it's not a soft touch, but we do not send any children forcibly anywhere. We have a statutory duty, and Luton does that. And other local authorities, Home Office have been written for the last 6-7 years to ask the other local authorities, not very far from here, maybe some of our neighbours, they will not take those children. They come at Addington services on the lorries, but the central beds bring them into Luton. And that is the reality of life. It is very unfortunate. Other local authorities do not take their moral obligation and legal obligation to do that. Instead, Luton finishes up with no children, separated children, those children that have travelled in either on the lorries or any other form, or they finish up here. But Home Office is well aware of it because Luton has been writing to them for years, but they haven't done anything in terms of their law. They should force local authorities to do that. They don't.
I think Dheeraj wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for having started this hair run.
That's okay. Dheeraj, I think you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last point I'd like to make is that more often than not, the reason they're called separated migrant children is because they are coming in through some of the most traumatic and treacherous routes, through people smuggling, exploitation, and actually just during this practice week, so Sanjay alluded to, we heard directly from a separated migrant child whose journey was significantly treacherous through several countries and continents before finding themselves in Luton. So they don't sadly come with family members.
I guess, I mean, that kind of like highlights the need for sort of safe and legal routes as well. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? So don't see any hands up on the screen. I don't think we've got anyone on the screen anyway. The recommendation is that the Children's Services Review Group consider and comment on the proposed move to improve to move the improvement highlight report to a bi-monthly basis. I mean, as chair, I'm quite comfortable with moving it to bi-monthly. I think looking at the key milestones of the various actions, I'm quite comfortable with that. Obviously, I didn't want to make the decision without putting it to committee. So are we all agreed that you know, we'll move to bi-monthly and note the content of the report? Yeah, agreed. So that's agreed. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is item 8, and this was circulated as a to follow item. So this is a summary of a consultation on children and service workforce, and this was I think a national update. So sorry, is that in your hand? So is that you, dear Ed? Sorry.
Just by a very brief introduction to this report, Chair, the committee asked for this report. As you will be aware, 2022 was a very busy year, particularly for children's social care. Just want to highlight a few inquiries that were undertaken at the time. So one was the independent inquiry into children's services across England, undertaken by Josh McAllister. There was a national child safeguarding practice review into the very sad murders of Star Hobson and Arthur Lavinia Hughes. There was a independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in England. And there was a Competition and Markets Authority review of placement sufficiency. As a result of all those reviews, the government published earlier this year, Stable Homes Built on Love, which was their 6-phase implementation strategy into reforms in children's social care. And off the back of that strategy, they opened up several consultations for local authorities, families, individuals, and partners who could respond to them. The work had started before I started in Luton, so a fair bit of work had already begun here around collating views right across the partnership and within the organisation. I've got officers here who are going to go through the presentation to provide you with some further detail. A number of these consultations, including working together, information sharing, we're due to hear back from government very soon. There was a workforce consultation that's been delayed, and although the consultation's finished, the findings from that, I understand from the DFE, aren't going to be made available till at least the end of the year, if not the beginning of next year. But I'm going to hand over to Sanjay, who will start us off with the first of the many consultations.
Thank you very much. So the first consultation was to look at the workforce. As you are aware, there is an over-reliance on agency staff in many local authorities, and which obviously is costly and could be said, and we do have differing views on that, could be not in the best interest of our children and young people that we work with because of the transient nature of an agency staff, an agency worker. So the consultation took place between February and May of this year. And as Derek said, the stakeholders to all of our consultations were local authorities, children's trusts, directors of social care, children's social care workers, workforce, principal social workers, practice leads, all across the board. What the The case set out a set of standardised national rules. So, for example, high quality and stable workforce is always at the heart of enabling better relationship building with children and families that as a workforce we agree with. Development of expertise and improving the quality of supervision. Agency staff often have a high turnover and frequently move at short notice, directly conflicting with the core social work values and standards. The independent review recommended a national rules aimed at reducing the over-reliance on agency workers to enable higher quality and more stable workforce, and also to reduce costs. So the parameters focused on price caps for local authorities with regards to agency workers' pay, post-qualifying experiences needed for agency workers, the use of project teams, reference notice periods and movements between agency workers and substantive roles, because the notice period is quite short, some cases just a week. Collection and sharing of pay and agency data, and adhering to procurement routes with the national rules. So there was 8, the consultation proposed and sought the views on 8 rules. So the requirement of the procurement routes for all local authorities to engage with agency workers, and they must adhere to the national rules. As I said, the price cap, the requirements for all social workers graduating after 2024 to have a minimum of 5 years post-qualifying experiences and working within local authority social care departments, and also to complete their assessed year in employment. And that's really important in terms of ensuring quality staff in order then to become an agency worker. And that was really the core of the consultation. There, obviously, we will find out, as I say, later in the year, next year, with regards to the outcome and what's going to be adopted and how that will affect local authorities. But obviously, there is a realisation in terms of the impact of agency staff on cost. But on the flip side, sometimes agency staff, being an agency worker, may develop and support a practitioner's career journey. So you need to get that balance in respect of the benefits of agency staff versus the negatives. So, as I say, we will find out more later on in the year in the spring, and we can report back in terms of the government findings on this consultation. So I'm going to hand over to Natasha Sampson. Natasha is covering my substantive post as Head of Service in the Safeguarding Quality Assurance team, and it's a joint role with Beverly McConnell, who will be taking over from Natasha. So Natasha.
Good evening, everyone. So I've been asked to come and talk to you about the Working Together consultation, and as I'm sure you know, the last revision of it was published in 2018. So this consultation is arguably the most significant consultation that we've had in a number of years. And Working Together really sets out the framework of how we work with our partners to safeguard children. And I think it's fair to say that if we don't get our working together right, it's difficult to do much else. So it's quite a significant consultation. I understand that you would have received the presentation already that sets out our responses. So I shan't bore you with a death by PowerPoint for each of those responses. But what I would just like to draw your attention to is just some key facts. So the first is that the consultation period was between the 21st of June to the 6th of September, so it's actually closed now. We were able to give responses as a local authority, so we went out to consultation across the local authority and got responses from various different places within our services: children with disabilities, our quality assurance, our family assessment, family safeguarding. We also done some consultation with our partners, led by Bev as well. So those responses were put in separately. And of course, we encouraged staff as well to make individual contributions, which you are able to do directly on the .gov website. And overall, we had a general consensus in the way that we responded. I think one of the key things that they were asking about, it's very basic, but just a change in name and whether we should be looking to change the working together title. And the general consensus was that no, we wouldn't recommend a change. I think there was some dissenting views with that. In that they felt that actually by changing it, it would help to strengthen partners' understanding in particular, because when we think about safeguarding, often it's instinctively, because there's a duty on the local authority, there's the thought that actually we are the ones that kind of lead the charge. And this consultation is broadening that, it's looking to strengthen that, and it's the first step towards strengthening, which would then be followed by some legislative changes that would support those changes. So that discussion is still taking place, but essentially the idea is that it would strengthen everybody's kind of understanding. So when we say partners, looking at the police, our health partners, our education partners, youth justice, and bring some clarification. I would say some of the key areas, just to bring your attention to, would be section 3, which was help and support for children and their families. This is particularly significant. Some would argue that the recommendation is that we return to social work as it was previously, that there's more that's done within that kind of early help space. I would say in summary, it's looking at bridging the gap between what's available kind of within the universal services and early help space and what we do for children in need and that statutory kind of role. I would say other things just to bring your attention to would be in trying to strengthen the use of family networks and changing the wording so that there is a recognition that family also includes those that are connected, that are not blood relations, which is really important, is really crucial. Another area as well is support for our children with disabilities and trying to remove the stigmatization that you can get, the stigma, and a lot of families being reluctant to access support. I think there is so much within the consultation. So that's just a kind of overall summary. I'll check with my esteemed colleague here if she'd like to add anything, because it's huge, and Bev did lead on a number of consultations with our partners.
Tasha, I think that is in terms of some of the sea change parts of the consultation that were being proposed was changed to how our partnerships were working. As you'll be aware, because you would have seen our independent scrutineer, Alan Caton, here to present the LSAB, which is now LSAP, sorry, I should say the full word, Luton Safeguarding Children Partnership Report. One of the proposals was that the independent scrutineer would no longer be a chair, and that there would be a move to having a partnership chair who would be drawn from the partners, and there would be delegated roles from the safeguarding statutory partners. So it was looking at some really sea changes. And I think from the wider consultation within the partnership and the feedback we've had from some of the professional associations, some parts of that part of the consultation were not so welcome as others, because the way the partnership works at the moment, particularly in Luton, is it's a robust partnership. Certainly when Ofsted did their ILACS inspection, they commented on the strengths of the partnership and the strengths of multi-agency learning. So we will await the outcome of the consultation, which won't be until the autumn, and any new revised guidance should be available by April, we're told.
Thank you, Bev. Open to questions.
Thank you. Before I've got a couple of questions, but before I ask mine, I'll just see whether there are any hands raised. No. Okay. So just a couple of questions from me on page. Can't see any page numbers actually. Under, I think on where it says about the price caps for the agency workers. Sorry, this would be a question for you. So on the price caps for agency workers, one of my concerns is that if this is a national price cap, so something that's sort of not managed locally, it could put areas like Luton perhaps at a disadvantage against other areas where cost of living might be slightly lower. Is that something that has come up in any of the consultations or certainly any of the feedback that we've provided?
I think one of the reasons it's been delayed is because there will be disparity. Obviously, we're going to have some affluent areas where cost of living is going to be higher. So I would expect that the government is considering all those proposals. Previously, the government has left it to regions to manage its local population and the way in which it sets its local wages. So we're waiting for some further considerations there. But I think you're right, Chair, that actually that could be an issue. Having said that, there's an advantage that it prevents local authorities from competing and from private agencies using that as a competition opportunity as well, because all it takes is hiking it by £1, and then you can't stop yourself. So.
Understood, sir. The double-edged sword. And so I guess linked to that, is there the risk that actually we could find ourselves in a situation where actually instead of having agency staff, we might be in a position where we haven't got the staff there, and so the children are losing out on key services that way. I guess has that been considered in the feedback as well?
Yeah, I think with our strive to create to grow our own, and we're doing really well with regards to that. In our social work academy, we have about 50 practitioners. We have 10 apprentices that started 2 weeks ago. We've got a cohort of 36 ASYEs. We've got our step up students. So these are postgraduate students that are fast tracking into social work, and we've been really successful of keeping those students on as practitioners. I'm a grow your own. I've been here 20 years and I started as a residential worker. So we're really building the foundations to keep our workforce and keep them permanently. So I see when this comes in, actually, we would be moving towards very few agency workers rather than a higher percentage.
Thank you. To see. Sorry, so Councillor Member Hussain and then.
Yeah, this is in terms of the agency workers. I mean, one of the regional agreement was between the local authorities was that they will not, in terms of the competition, that they will have a, Eastern region has their own agreement. A couple of the authority, Hertfordshire, Luton, Central Beds, and those they had their own agreement. Is that still, and is government going to legislate, or do you think that, I doubt they will, but is there a hope that they would do that a national standard, which then makes it a lot easier for region to be able to agree to something, doesn't it? Is that what the idea of this is, or is it they're leaving it the local authorities to come to an agreement?
So to answer your first question, the memorandum of cooperation very much exists in the Eastern region, and we're part of it along with, I think, 10 other local authorities in the Eastern region. So that exists. And yes, absolutely. As the consultation was, a main feature of the consultation was around the national price cap. That is something that the government is considering legislating on. What that will be is yet to be seen.
You mentioned, and I'm pleased to hear that, is that we are able to keep our newly qualified social worker to stay in Luton, because one of the things was after they've done 2 or 3 years, they were moving just down the road to the Hertfordshire. And who could offer you more in terms of not only one of the issues was also the having the facilities to park their cars. That's one. and the second one was actually financial. And so Luton couldn't compete with Hertfordshire because the size of the authority and the money they would offer. So are you saying to me that our newly qualified or semi-experienced are staying with us longer than they used to? Is that the norm now? Is it, because that's excellent, if that is the case, that they do continue to stay here?
I'd like to give assurances that Luton is getting a good news story. So our apprentice scheme attracted 42 applications. We had 10 posts. So that says something about how Luton is now being seen as a place to work. Our ASYEs, we have a steady flow of applications to come into our academy. Our academy is a unique academy, different to our partner, our other local authorities in the area where we support, but they're in teams and we have a lot of support going into them. So it's about those foundations and how we support our practitioners in the first couple of years to hopefully they stay with us. We do lose some along the way. I can't sit here and say that we keep all of our practitioners due to their own personal circumstances, may move away, other things happen, babies, marriage, life happens. But we are certainly, in it for the long haul in terms of the academy. It's 3 years in. We are strengthening that process to ensure that we keep our social workers well over the 3-year mark. We have aspirations 5 to 10 years in terms of our social work workforce. And then parking is always an issue in Luton. We know that. I think that's something that's never going to go away because of, the dense population, how, everybody's got a car and so forth. It's about how creative we are, how creative our workforce are in terms of how they do their visits, where they park, because there are lots of little secret places to park, should I say, in Luton. But it's about the support and communication and that induction process for our social workers.
That's encouraging because I see quite a few of them come into the Dunstable place, and even when we come in, we used to have some sort of space to park in, and now I'm glad to see the social worker have taken the place over, which slowly becoming probably closer to them, get into the town hall and then get back to the job that they're doing. So there is some encouraging sign. That problem is probably not as serious what it used to be. But thank you. It's really pleasing to hear.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Abbas and then Councillor Khan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, so I may ask a couple and then let somebody else. I don't want to be seen to hogging the microphone. I was just going to go back to the working together consultation. And I noticed there was a lot of responses there that were neutral or neither agree or disagree. I just wondered why that was. Do we not think much of what the government's doing? Would it benefit what they're saying, or will we just be neutral for the sake of not upsetting government?
I think we've given a collective response from across children's services, and generally, what I would say is that the consultation it's got a lot of positives within it, but ultimately, I think the general thought was the proof is in the pudding. It's in the actual delivery of the work. So I don't think that was an apathy, because actually we did get quite a lot of responses back again. What we've done is just pulled together the general, because I think we did have quite a lot of narrative. So with teams or each team that was asked to do a consultation provided back narrative, but you'll notice in your presentation you were given, just for a lot of it, there's very few boxes that give narratives. Most of it just asks you, do you agree, do you not agree, do you neutral? So what we've done is looked at the narrative and looked at what closely matches, and where we've got an opportunity to give the narrative, then we've provided the narrative. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, I have to say, my view in terms of government consultations is that when you are asked to provide information in that way, this is my personal view, it limits the richness of the feedback that can be given. And you've got to then essentially just fit it in as best you can. Would you like to add anything to that, Bev?
Yes, I think just to add that in terms of some of those neutrals, we didn't have enough of the detail to understand how it would work. There was lots of ideas around, particularly if you looked in the early help space, and for one of the things there that there's some national pilots happening, and the working together consultation document keeps talking about what will happen when they are fulfilled, what further guidance will come out of those. So it was very difficult to tell because it's things that hasn't happened yet. And certainly in terms of the division of practitioners to be a lead professional and then a responsible case holder, without having the detail of how it was thought to be worked and what that implications that had for resourcing, staffing, how you'd work with families in that way, that's why you had some that were more neutral. But a lot of the working together consultation was quite positive. It's just working out the details and thinking about the implications for putting it in practice and working with families. And I think where you'll find some of the strongest responses was around the principles for working with children and families, and how practitioners should work together. Those principles were strongly agreed with.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a bit of apathy and we were, or we didn't think the government's proposal was that brilliant. But I understand there's a lot of evidence and there's a lot of piloting going on, and hopefully when you get the detail, it'll probably help. I've got another question, and this is around, I think, the mandatory reporting of child sex abuse. And it was just a bizarre context thing there. On one of the pages says, when a child, I'll read this, where the child is aged between 13 and 16 years old, a report need not be made where the mandated reporter reasonably believes, and there's a list of things. I just found that a bit odd. Who's decided age 13 is right? Because I think at age 13, children are, you're still a child. You may not know what consent is. You may not even realize you're being groomed. So I just find that very difficult. Is that the law, or who's put that age 13 in there?
Because under the Sexual Offences Act, a child under the age of 13 cannot give consent for any sexual act. So that's why the benchmark is 13. There was also a lot of narrative in the consultation document itself. And I think the thing is with the mandatory reporting, this was a separate consultation that came out of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that reported in 2022. And in response to that, the government made a number of recommendations. And the mandatory reporting was recommendation 13. So there's quite a lot that was put into it. And I think our response around some of the mandatory reporting and particularly around the exceptions, we felt it would need further clarity because if you've got a child who's under 13, that's obviously covered by the Sexual Offences Act. But if you've got a child age 13 and over and then 16 to 18, that very much depends on vulnerability and the context. And people would have to look at what they're reporting and why. So that's why you'll see that within that consultation, our responses are, sometimes we say we don't agree or we're unsure because, again, it's, well, how would that play out? And what they're talking about is new national guidance, a change to legislation. And what we also know from the research is that where there has been national reporting in other countries, that there's been a significant increase in the numbers of cases that are reported. That has an impact on the young people themselves where it's reported. It has an impact on services. It has an impact on resources. But what you really need to do is make sure that you get the right cases in at the right time. So for us, the strongest piece was about making sure that there were clear indicators and people, regardless of whether it was mandatory reporting or not, knew what sexual abuse looked like and how to report it.
I know you say it's the law, but I don't feel comfortable with the age 13. And if there's anything we can do and feed something back to government, that at least that should go up to 16. And I think it doesn't sit well with. I know the government's introduced a statutory relationship and sex education program that includes consent, but I don't think it's. I think they say you should cover it by the end of secondary, which is 16. I think there's a mismatch there, and we probably need to be lobbying government to change the law and put that up to 16, that it should be mandatory reporting up to the age of 16. 16 to 18, you could say maybe a child is mature enough and maybe understands what consent is and they would have now currently had an RSE curriculum that they've been taught at school where they will cover consent, and we'll probably have an idea of what grooming is as well. But I just think 13 is way too young for me, and that's a personal opinion. I'll just stop there, Chair, and let somebody else have it. I've got a couple more questions, but just stop.
Report in terms of it being possibly a criminal offence, or that you would be reported to your professional regulation. There is already an expectation in working together that any form of abuse or neglect is reported. This is just looking at if they make it a crime or some kind of other professional regulation offence, not to report, and who that should be, who it should cover. So we will always have reports from practitioners, working, because we already have the system in place for them to put reports into children's social care or the police where it's a criminal offence. So it's I know the terminology can be a little bit confusing, but this is just to say we want a separate law to say if you don't report, we will hold you accountable. But there's already a requirement to report.
Yeah, that makes sense. Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Chair. I think going back to the question of the national price cap, I don't know whether you'd have sort of some intelligence around, there's a general election coming up, it's not far away, whether you have some intelligence around if there was legislation to be, created around this, how long sort of the implementation would take of that, and how long it would take for us as a result, as a local authority, to adopt that. I mean, it's fine if you don't have any intelligence on that, but just a random thought.
I think it'd be very difficult to be able to give it. I mean, it would be very much down to how the government lobbies the private agencies, where regions have implemented some very clear boundaries. And I've come from London, which introduced the London Pledge, and that took over a year, possibly 18 months to actually implement. And even then, that's needed some very close monitoring. Obviously, in terms of intelligence, I think it'd be very difficult to give you any further information, Councillor Khan.
Councillor Abbas, you have more?
Can I go back to one of the recommended consultation points was about minimum requirements for social workers, that they need to have 5 years experience before they can become an agency worker. Would that not create a shortage of agency workers? Because obviously, I don't know if the government's thought this through, but you were saying earlier, Sandra, that a lot of local authorities have agency social workers. Putting this requirement, would that not create some sort of shortage? Or
thank you for a very useful question. I think it's the opposite. I think our agency cohort will become permanent members of staff, because those workers who between that sort of 1 to 5 year period will have to be permanent in the local authority, and then that's where you catch them for them to remain permanent. So I think it would have a positive impact on the workforce as a whole. As I said, there will be some practitioners that are long in the tooth that will remain agency. There will be a need for agency workers to cover, for example, maternity leave, fixed term contracts. So that industry will always be there. But what we hope to do is shift it to a more permanent workforce, and that we can keep them longer than that 5 year cap, where then they can go agency workers. We do have to be alive to the fact of the cost of living crisis. For some practitioners, being a permanent member of staff may not suit them. And that's something that we're always, as any local authority, is going to grapple with, but it's what you do in that 5-year period. I think that's the most important time.
Can I ask also, I mean, excuse my ignorance, probably I don't know enough about the social workforce. Why do they want to go and work in an agency and not have a permanent job? Is it better pay? What is it? Is it, you know, I would have thought most people want a permanent job, want that security rather than an agency. Or is there so much agency work, you're probably better off there? I mean, I don't know if the government's doing anything about that.
Okay. Coming from a non-practitioner who have not done agency work, I can understand where you're coming from. But agency work for some practitioners suits their lifestyle, suits their career opportunities. They may want to dip their toe into other areas. Pay is a factor because it's immediate, it's weekly pay as opposed to monthly pay, so may suit their need. They may think, oh, I might go into a local authority, see what it's like, and then take the opportunity to convert to temp to perm. We've got a practitioner sitting in this room that have done exactly that. So there's lots of different reasons why people become agency workers. But what we want to do as a local authority in respect of pay is say, actually, these are the benefits that we can give you as a permanent member of staff. It's not just those hard notes at the end of each week. It's our learning opportunities, our training, our our family ethos that we have in Luton. It's what we can bring to you to hopefully entice you to become a permanent member of staff.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair. I just want to come back with one point to add to Sancho's points. As part of this particular consultation, the government went out and spoke to a range of agency workers across the country. There were several national webinars held, and one piece of feedback received that I've had sight of as well was that there was a higher proportion of Black and Asian agency workers in the profession. And one of the reasons for that was because they didn't feel that they had the same level of career opportunities given to them because of institutional challenges that prevented that. So that's an important factor that needs to be taken into consideration both locally and nationally about how we support that promotion of the global majority population as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wynne. Yep.
Yes, just two things. First of all, the discussion here I found quite encouraging. I think the thing is the whole discussion has been quite good. Now, I know I'm known for being a pedant, but if you look at the page that says at the top, the consultation, and it's underneath the concern that the chair expressed earlier on about national price caps, because I share his concern on that. But it's the next one, section 7. Is this Luton Borough Council's wording or is this central government's wording? Because I know it sounds stupid, but when I read that, I did not understand it. And it's simply the fact that the letter D is at the end of graduated. Because if you read it, it says a requirement for social workers who graduated in or after to demonstrate a minimum of 5 years post-qualified experience. That is not what was meant. It's saying that anybody who graduates in or after that date will need to demonstrate the working. It's the wording is wrong. It doesn't leap at you and explain what it is that's trying to be said.
Thank you for pointing out that. We will look at that. This is our wording because we've pulled this PowerPoint together, and it is, you're right, it's whoever graduates in or after April 2024.
No, I know I'm being nitpicky, but if I coming in and not being a regular member of this panel read that and don't understand it, that's not good.
As I say, thank you ever so much for pointing that out, and I will go back in because I think it's really important that we have that corrected on the record.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? No. So the recommendation was just to note the contents of the presentation and the report. So thank you everyone for your explanation of the report and so on. We'll move on to the next and I think final item of the agenda, which is the work plan, which is on pages 19 to 32 of the agenda. So the next meeting, which is on the 26th of October, we currently have the standing item, which actually we might need to review given the fact that we're actually going to bi-monthly. Certainly we can perhaps discuss that, Dheeraj, and look at whether we move something else into that space. But we've got the fostering annual report and the children's social care stable homes built on love consultation update.
Chair. That children's social care stable homes built on consultation, isn't that the consultation you've just delivered to tonight's meeting? So that should come off.
Okay.
And I suspect we won't have any now with the delays to the workforce consultation outcomes. I don't think we're going to have much of an update to be able to provide at the next meeting.
Also, Chair, the Luton Safeguarding Children's Plan annual report, it's been requested to come to the October meeting.
Okay. So that's yeah, so that was the one that was scheduled for I think December, moving forward to October. Okay. To the next meeting. Okay. So that's Beverly McConnell and Alan Caton. Yeah. Okay, great. And they're obviously aware that the deadline, they've got until 11th of October for the report, so you're aware of that. Yeah. Okay, thank you. If any member has anything that they would like sort of added or adjusted in this work plan, then do let me know as chair, and I can we do have I do have regular meetings with the officers, and we can look at adjusting things. Any questions or comments on the work plan? No. Okay. I think that closes our business for today then. Thanks to everyone for your input, and have a good evening. Cheers.